Hello, my name is Travis Newbill with Shambhala Mountain Center, which is a retreat center up in the Colorado Rockies, if you don't know. And we're going to be hosting a very awesome program, I know from experience, called Embodied Listening, Uncovering Our Body's Natural Wisdom. That's coming up May 26th through the 29th here in 2017. And David Rome and Hope Martin, the presenters who will be leading that program, are here on the line today to have some discussion. By way of brief introduction, Hope Martin is an Alexander Technique teacher. She's been teaching for 30 years. She also trains Alexander teachers at the American Center for the Alexander Technique, and she operates Hope Martin Studios in New York City. David I. Rome is the developer of mindful focusing and integration of Eugene Gendlin's felt sense focusing and Buddhist mindfulness awareness practices. David and Hope, such good friends of Shambhala Mountain Center, and it's always such a joy to connect with the two of you. Thank you for taking the time this morning.
Great, thanks, Travis. I'm really looking forward to talking a little bit about our work. It's a very unique program, and it works with three main practices: mindfulness meditation practice, the Alexander Technique, and which is what I teach, and then David teaches focusing. So, and David will tell you more about it, obviously, but in this interview, like from now on, when we refer to focusing, it's referred to that practice, because the term's used in many ways. So, yeah, so anyway, hello, and David, is there anything you want to say by introduction?
Just that I am excited to be returning to Shambhala Mountain Center at this beautiful time of year. Spring in the mountains is so wonderful, and very much looking forward to it. Yeah,
we're supposed to get a spring snow this week up on the land, so the land should be nice and quenched. The greenery is starting to come out, so beautiful indeed.
Yeah.
Why don't we begin by each of you just saying a little something about your work. Hope you could say something about Alexander, and then David could say something about mindful focusing, just to provide some ground for everyone.
Yeah, so the Alexander Technique was developed by someone named Alexander, who he died in 1955 at the age of 87, so he really developed his work through the latter part of the 19th century and the first half of the 20th century. And basically, he was an actor with voice trouble, and he was very interested in getting back on stage, and in the process of trying to deal with his vocal problems, he developed this what I call a Western contemplative practice called the Alexander Technique, which is a lot about learning about observing unconscious habitual patterns, how they show up in the body, patterns of tension and constriction and postural habits, the things we feel we can't change, and learning to become intimate with those patterns, and then basically learning a process of not trying to correct the patterns, but rather developing the conditions whereby the body's knowing about how to be upright, expansive, and at ease can actually happen on its own. So often we sort of override our own bodily knowing by trying too hard, by working too hard at things, by overly focusing and contracting in the process. And the Alexander Technique really works with becoming aware of those patterns in the moment and then freeing them up. And interestingly enough, the body knows all about freeing them up, because we came into the world as healthy young children, very expansive, upright, responsive to our world. And if you saw a healthy young child, sitting like this, or a young child sitting like this, you wouldn't necessarily, you'd be concerned about that kid. But that is not a weird pattern for adults to engage in. Or conversely, if you saw a young child trying too hard, trying to have good posture and being rigid and held, it would be a red flag for other problems, that isn't the sign of health. So So actually, Alexander worked out this, as I said, it's a Western contemplative practice that works with awareness, and then awareness of habitual patterns of interference, and then learning to stop trying to change them, and instead waiting and encouraging the body's knowing about how to be easeful, upright, and free of tension and present. That's really a formula for being highly present in the world, is not being held and tense. So it goes very, very well with meditation practice.
Mm-hmm.
Yeah.
And as does mindful focusing, I know. So I wonder, David, maybe you could now say a little bit about your work.
Sure. The focusing is also a Western contemplative practice. It was developed by Eugene Gendlin, who is a philosopher and a psychologist. And he started developing this work in the 1950s at the University of Chicago. So it's also Western, it's also contemplative, it's also about the body, but it's a different aspect of the body, or a different way of experiencing the body. And it has to do with finding the way in which the body holds meaning. In other words, there's what Gendlin called felt senses that one can experience in the body that are pre-verbal and pre-conceptual. But if you're able to get in touch with these felt senses, they hold a lot of information about our life situations. And so it can be very helpful in working with challenges, problems, decisions, and creative process as well. What more do I want to say there? So in focusing, we begin very much in the same way as basic mindfulness practice, but really bringing the mindfulness into the body. And so dropping out of the discursive realm, the momentum of habitual thoughts and patterns and so forth, and creating a kind of gap there in which something else can show up. And we invite these felt senses to show up. Now, felt senses are usually subtle or vague or unclear. And what that means is that most people don't even notice them most of the time. They're always there in some way, but they don't break through into consciousness. But if we provide the space for them, then they will show up. And even if they're unclear at first, as we spend time with them and welcome them, then they come into focus, which is why Gendlin called the practice focusing. So it's not the conventional meaning of focusing. And by being with these felt senses, bodily senses, and as they come into focus, then we can actually enter into a dialogue with them and get information from the body that the mind doesn't know yet. But as we get it, then we get insights that are maybe unexpected, but are very fresh. And those insights then can be articulated with words and also with actions. And so it's a powerful way of working with one's own life. And in the focusing, where it departs from just meditation, is you really choose to be with a certain situation. I have a certain problem, so I get into that contemplative space. I think about the problem a little bit, I remember about it, but then I just drop the storyline, drop the narrative, and just be with the body sense, and patient, gentle. Sometimes it's a while before these felt senses show up. But they are the sources of fresh insight and fresh energy, really, to be able to move out of places that are blocked or habitual patterns, and move into a richer and more present life.
So maybe kind of interesting or surprising for people to hear these two practices, very much about the body and things occurring within the body. Meditation maybe more broadly associated with the mind or the head, or with maybe a conventional notion of focusing. And so how do these practices, Alexander and mindful focusing, why do they go together with meditation, mindfulness meditation so well? Why do you present them alongside mindfulness meditation? What may be unique, or why does this work?
Well, initially I started teaching Alexander technique to meditators because of the challenges of sitting meditation and how hard it is to sit. That seems to be a really recurring theme for meditators. And so I've had a lot of experience working in retreats and with meditators on their practice. And it's been a long time since I've been doing it, but so getting more grounded, getting easier in oneself, not trying to hold a posture, which has a lot of kind of fixed quality. So in other words, when we try hard to hold a posture, then our bodies are stiff and rigid, and we're trying to work with our minds, bringing our training in being present, and we are not bringing our whole life into the practice when we're approaching practice that way. So the idea of getting really naturally expansive and grounded on the meditation cushion is a way to actually relate with the practice fully, so that it's not just a mind practice, it's a whole being practice. Mm-hmm. And it becomes obvious that sort of warding off impermanence, like the ability to relate with the moving, changeable, dynamic quality of our life is really thwarted by fixed posture on the cushion, either a collapsed posture or of an overly striving posture. So it's a integrated expression of being fully present, being attentive to oneself, not blocking one's own personal experience in the practice, not trying to get away from oneself, but really including one's whole self in the practice. And also because, we talk about Buddha nature or basic goodness in the practice, but if we can't find it in a sort of deeply personal way, that we're including our own life, our own stuckness, our own bravery, the whole thing in the practice, then we never really access it on a personal level. It becomes kind of an idea. Mm-hmm. So it's so that's I know that the focusing work really works with spiritual bypassing, but I think bringing the body fully into the practice also does, because the body holds our entire life, our own personal karma, our own whatever situation we were born into, or even our family lineage and the lineage of humanity. Mm-hmm. So relating with the body fully really brings us into the practice fully.
Mm-hmm. And David, what might you say from the point of view of focusing in relation to meditation?
Well, Hope mentioned spiritual bypassing, And people may not be familiar with that term, but what it refers to is when you're using a spiritual practice and using it to bypass or ignore, not relate with the whole of your life, and especially your emotions and feelings and problems and so forth. Other than that, mindfulness is just like a kind of basic training. It's like practicing scales when you're learning to play the piano. I mean, it's much more than that also, but it is basic training in how to, again, to create a gap or to cut the speed and momentum of our habitual mind process. And that's one of the first things that people discover when they sit down to meditate. And they think the idea is, well, just meditate and it's a kind of a trance and nothing happens. But a great deal happens. And we start to realize really how busy our minds are. And that's an important discovery. And then as we practice, gradually the mind is able to settle down. It's able to become more still and more clear. And then in the further stages of meditation, that develops into insight and spiritual understanding and a much deeper quality of self-awareness.
Mm-hmm. Let's see, I want to ask to you, like, people who are maybe new to meditation, or for people who are experienced in meditation, like, how might this be helpful and on what levels? You know, we heard Hope talking about just to kind of sit there and actually try to sit there and meditate for 20 minutes could be really challenging just on a basic physical level, all the different aches and tensions that happen. And I may mention here that I've been lucky enough to work with Hope with my own posture and meditation. And throughout just this conversation and this interview, I've noticed little, like, I don't know, moments where I'm tensing up somewhere and then releasing that, and then the effect that has on my whole mood and energy and ability to communicate is really significant. And that's been something I'm just doing that. I'm in the habit of doing that now, and was not before I worked with Hope and did this work. And so on the meditation cushion, or just generally in life, I have these sort of habits of, like, clenching up or different ways. And then, that sequence of not trying to correct it, but noticing it. And then there is a sort of natural alignment that I am familiar with now more and more as I work with it. That's been incredibly helpful. So, what do you call it? A little testimonial there. But also anything that either of you might say about, for beginning meditators or people who've been meditating for a long time, how is this work helpful?
Yeah, well, let me just say something about, just on the heels of what you just said. I mean, I think those little ways that we hold ourselves or tense up, or, some of them are subtle and some of them are not so subtle, but they always serve to block direct access to the present moment on some level. And so to start to integrate the body with the practice in that way is so helpful. I mean, it's said that ego is held by tension. It's held in place by tension patterns, and tension, mind tension, body tension, and it becomes clear that there's really no separation between the two, and that it's deeply joyous to actually come into a balanced state in oneself and start to sense all the mobility and life energy that we normally block through our habitual patterns. and to actually abide in it, so that practice starts to feel very life-giving, not a chore, but a very access to our aliveness. Yeah. So whether you're a beginning meditator or an advanced meditator, I mean, we practice our habits, and most of those habits are unknown to us. So, and then, we get a little information from a meditation instructor about sitting up straight, and then we start practicing that habit. And there are so many of these habits are about blocking our aliveness and blocking our access to the present moment. So, yeah. It's pretty basic to integrate it, and for us to always be thinking of meditation as a mind practice without seeing that our mind is through our whole system, and that it's not just our brain. It's like we're not just a big head sitting on the cushion.
Anything you'd add to that, David?
Well, in the context of the focusing work and meditation, Gyam Trungpa Rinpoche, who was my teacher as well as the founder of Shambhala Mountain Center, now 45 years ago. That's pretty amazing to think about. But he described meditation as the practice of making friends with yourself. Just making friends with yourself. And at the beginning, we might not even realize that there's a need to make friends with ourselves, although I think these days more and more people are starting to be aware of how they can be very hard on themselves, very self-critical, and not able to be friendly and have really a positive relationship with themselves. So the focusing piece is an extension of that principle, because one aspect of oneself are these deeper sources of feeling that are not are not visible and may not show up just in the course of mindfulness meditation. So by being a little more deliberate about inviting those and making a relationship with those, then we begin to make friends with even deeper or more knotty, difficult aspects of ourselves, including some kinds of issues that may be a very long-standing, that we feel, well, this will never change. I've tried everything. And it won't change because you haven't gotten to the source level. It has to change at the source. And the source is in the body, not in the mind.
It seems like things from, I don't know, my own just 10 years of experience of regular meditation practice, and also with conversations with people who have been on the path or practicing meditation for decades. These seem like fundamental things to the practice or the whole path that are returned to again and again. And I guess, an intensive like you're going to be offering, or a full weekend, as a way to either first encounter these experiences and these practices, or as a refresher, it could be very valuable. I wonder if there's anything about the retreat itself coming up at SMC, weekend retreat, end of May, that we haven't touched on yet. Maybe, what can people expect from the retreat? What are we going to be doing in there? That sort of thing. Anything we haven't said yet that you'd like to say about the program?
One thing is that this retreat is over the Memorial Day weekend, which gives us an additional day. Hope and I have taught this all over the country and in Canada, and but usually it's just a Friday evening through a Sunday afternoon. And here we have the opportunity to stretch that out. And so that's a real opportunity. And because we're working with 3 different practices, there's quite a lot of material. but this is an opportunity to get into it more deeply, and for us as the teachers not to feel that we have to rush.
Yeah, that's always nice. Anything you want to include there, Hope?
Yeah, I'll just say a little bit about the structure of the weekend. Like, we will be meditating throughout the weekend, and when that happens, this is really appropriate for beginning meditators also. So we give meditation instruction, we practice, and while the practice is happening, I go around and do hands-on work with the meditator. So what I'm communicating through my touch is more ease, more balance, more sort of buoyant, upright, and more connection to the earth. And so I go around and work with everyone briefly. And then what happens during the course of the day is that people go back to their habitual patterns. That's just how it is. And that provides that contrast. And then over and over again through the retreat, at least 2 or 3 times a day, I'm working with people while they're meditating. I'm also giving classes and teaching them how to access and understand their own body so they can access this buoyant upright on their own. We also work with other kinds of movement besides just meditation practice. And we do a lying down practice in the shrine room called constructive rest. And that is really a wonderful practice for teaching people to let their nervous system settle, so that they're not so inclined to push and try and be so engaged in their habitual responses. So it gives them a little sort of separation between to really deeply let their nervous system rest so that they can start to sense their impulses arising and learn to not go with them. So it's a study. The work I'm doing is really a study of habitual patterns and becoming intimate with the habitual pattern, because there's a contrast that's developed through the hands-on work. I get them out of their pattern for a moment, they go back into their pattern. And both are really, really important parts of the process, because this is about becoming intimate with our own responses, how they become entrenched and unconscious, bringing awareness to those patterns, and then also starting letting that be a portal for deeply befriending ourselves, so that we're not demonizing the patterns at all. Those protective patterns have been useful. And we start to make a heart connection to how we've actually moved through our life in an intelligent way, and at the same time how we've blocked access to the present moment and access to others through some of our protective holding patterns, and how we can shed that and be more present and more available. So it's not about it's about including those patterns as part of our understanding of ourselves and how we've developed ourselves, and bringing genuine sympathy to ourselves and learning to really love and trust our responses, and at the same time be free of the ones that are really not serving us. So the hands-on work and the contrast between the habit and the change is really helpful. And I guess that's what I would say. And I think that that is a really beautiful sort of way that the focusing, it really enhances the focusing process too, which David will talk about in a minute perhaps. But because we have more access to our feelings when we're not blocking, when we're not protecting ourselves, we have more access to those deeper feelings that David was talking about.
Mm-hmm.
Yeah.
David, anything else about the focusing?
No, not about the focusing, but I would just want to say again that the Shambhala Mountain Center, for people who haven't been there, is just a wonderful, powerful place. It's a fairly rugged landscape, although the facilities are very nice. It's around 8,000 feet, and it is a kind of space that really supports being on retreat and being able to get away from the hassles of everyday life, and at the same time be developing skills that will help you with the hassles of everyday life.
Definitely.
And it's just, I especially like being up there at that time because the first mountain wildflowers are just starting to come out. And they're so lovely and delicate, including cactus flowers. So it's just the nature experience of being there already is very very rich.
Hear, hear. And I hope that I hope that some of you who are tuned in here watching or listening may come up and join David and Hope for the retreat. We'd certainly love to host you. You can learn more about the retreat, which once again is called Embodied Listening, Uncovering Our Body's Natural Wisdom. And that's going to be led by David Rome and Hope Martin, who we've been in conversation with here today, May 26th through the 29th, 2017. So it's a long weekend, Memorial Day weekend. And you can learn about that retreat by following the link that is either below or above this video, depending on whether you're watching it on YouTube or on the Shambhala Mountain Center blog, or if you're listening to the SoundCloud audio recording, there's a link in the description or caption of the track. So please follow the link and learn about the retreat. You can also learn about this retreat and all the retreats we're hosting at Shambhala Mountain Center in coming months on shambhalamountain.org. And you can stay tuned to the Shambhala Mountain Center blog for more interviews like this and other content from teachers. And yeah, thank you so much for joining us, and we hope to see you up soon. Hope.
Could I say a couple parting words? Because it sounds like we're ending right now, right?
Yeah, we were, I think we're coming to the close, but
well, I did want to say that we do work in partnerships in the focusing where people, we learn to listen to each other and provide a lot of ample space and for another person's process. So we are learning how to be with another person in a very respectful, open, spacious way and not let some of our impulses get in the way of that. In terms of listening, our impulses to give advice or to jump in and interrupt someone. We really practice, because the focusing process is often done in a partnership. So we're practicing being with another human being in this very respectful way that supports them to go deeply into their own process. And I just wanted to say that I think that when we learn to be more present to ourselves, that really gives us the space to be present to others. So we're constantly in the workshop exploring this sort of going deeply into our own experience and then learning to take that out into the world and be more conscious, listening, available, loving human beings to our fellow humans. So, and that's a big part of the workshop. And also starting to see that the very thing that we thought we needed to get away from to be functional human beings, our own difficulty, our own holding patterns, our own anger issues, whatever it is, that the whole sort of approach is to make contact with that stuff and see the wisdom that resides in that. And that's a very, very unusual, unique way of looking at things. And I just wanted to put that out there. I think that makes this work very unique in the world, that we don't have to get away. And it's very akin to meditation practice, but we don't have to get away from those things. We need to learn about ourselves and to befriend ourselves and become comfortable with who we are. And that's the basis of a genuine life, not trying to improve.
Thank you. Thank you for adding that.
Yeah.
And also speaking to how just immediately applicable the practices and what we learn in this retreat are to the daily life and all the different aspects of our lives.
Yes. I had a student say to me that, from a retreat I lead at Shambhala Mountain Center, she said, it was like 7 years of psychotherapy in 7 days. But she meant good psychotherapy that really helped her, So this work is like that. It takes us deeply into some of into who we are.
Sure.
Yeah. Mm-hmm. Okay.
Yeah, thanks again. Thanks so much, David and Hope, for coming on today and sharing some wisdom and ideas.
Thank you, Pat. It's always a pleasure talking to you.
Yeah.
Yes, a pleasure. Thank you.
Yeah, pleasure is mine, and looking forward to seeing you up at Shambhala Mountain Center, and hopefully lots of the viewers and listeners here as well. It's definitely going to be a powerful weekend. They come up and lead this retreat annually, and so year after year, we see them come up. People come through the program and enter with a sort of glow. So, yep, thanks again, and stay tuned, and we'll see you soon.
Okay, thank you so much.
Okay.
Bye.
Bye.